Good morning. It is Thursday, May 28th. It's hard to believe that the month is coming to an end, but welcome to the weekly Sociality Squared Director's Cut Facebook Live, where I share a commentary on content that we produce at Sociality Squared, in addition to the latest social media and marketing news that we're paying attention to. Today, we're going to be discussing the power of questions, so stay tuned. Thank you for joining. We're in week 10 of lockdown here in New York City, and I know the country is opening up in different parts, but we also just surpassed the 100,000 deaths, which is just heartbreaking. So I just want to say, everyone who's been impacted, my heart is with your heart. I'm Helen Todd. If you don't know who I am, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sociality Squared. And if you're new to Sociality Squared, we're a social media agency who understands the magic of people coming together around what they value and love. And clients partner with us to grow their businesses and always know that we remember behind every screen is a person. In the comments to this video, there's some links where you can connect to Sociality Squared and myself. I'm Helen's Travels on Instagram and Twitter. And today, in addition to the theme of our main newsletter theme of Power of Questions, we'll also be discussing some S2 news, lots of social media news, and a look at the May 24th New York Times front page. And we'll end on a good note, I promise, with some inspiration. A quote from Einstein. So S2 News, May's newsletter just came out. The link is shared a lot of places, and I'll be sure to share it again after this video, and we'll be discussing a lot more. And if you haven't signed up for our monthly newsletter, please do. It's only one time a month we enter your inbox. Also, I'll be doing a few webinars and workshops in the coming weeks on our report card and action plan. Those links aren't live yet, but once they are, I will share them with you. This is something that's kind of exciting. One of my random coronavirus things that I've been doing is hacking games and figuring out how to do them online. Really enjoyed playing Cards Against Humanity with friends and testing a lot of different platforms. And Christy, who's on Sociality Squared's team, and a dear friend, and we actually met at college, and she's a part of the Xavier University Alumni Board. We got tapped to co-host a game night for Xavier alumni using a new platform that we're really big fans of called Icebreaker. So if anyone's watching who's a Xavier alum, we'll share that link to this too, and hope you can join us. It'll be a fun night, and it's not on Zoom. And I'm actually have been really impressed with Icebreaker because it's structured but light and fun. So looking forward to that. I'm also hosting or leading some Instagram 101 courses for the International Leica Society. That's another client of Sociality Squared's. If you're interested, you can become a member of the Leica Society and participate. These are for hobbyists, beginner photographers, amateur photographers, and it's going to be very 101 of how to use Instagram. But we love Leica and the Leica Society, so looking forward to that. Okay, so today's topic is the power of questions. And every month we always do a monthly theme for our S2 newsletter. And this month is questions. And just given where we are in the world right now, I think there's a lot of questions running through everyone's minds. But questions are actually interesting, and I had fun actually writing this and doing a little research. At Sociality Squared, curiosity is one of our core values, and it kind of comes with the territory of being in social media because it's changing constantly. So you just have to be curious what's happening and stay on top of the trends. But curiosity also leads to questioning. And one thing that this one study came across is 2-year-olds, or between 2 and 4 years old, toddlers ask like some 40,000 questions, which is really amazing in this very exploratory stage when some synapses are going off in their brains. But somewhere along the way, people lose questioning as much in that childlike wonderment. And that's something at Sociality Squared we try to cultivate, because we do a lot of creative brainstorming and coming up with ideas and campaigns for our clients. So we try to do that as much as we can. And then of course, every branding exercise always starts with what's your why on that front. And from a very also social media 101 perspective, asking questions is just a great way to foster engagement. If you are publishing social media posts and you're not getting much feedback or response, try asking a question or a poll or a quiz. And even though quizzes might not be the most clever tactic in the playbook by any means, but they do work. And one of the reasons why they work is that people are curious about themselves, and questions help explore people uh, more about themselves through questions. Or did I say that right? Yeah, people like to discover more about themselves through questions. And in a broader sense too, questions form connection. It's when you meet someone, you ask, "How are you?" Although that question feels a little loaded these days with everything happening in the world. But one of our clients shared something really beautiful earlier this week that I wanted to share. And it's Kumac. They're a nonprofit in New Jersey, and they're reimagining how food pantries work and how people are fed. And one of their key pillars is making sure people have dignity and treated like people throughout the whole process. And one of the key things that they're doing right now is, as people are waiting in line, which is just something for the current time being, usually it's by appointment, they just make sure to go up to them and ask their patrons, "How are you?" And that simple question just opens up so much conversation. And these people are just want to be asked and acknowledged, and craving someone to talk to. And you know questions are a great way they show interest, they build rapport, and it creates understanding. And specifically for Kumac, they also just show the person dignity. So that's something that's really important. And as I mentioned earlier, questions can also be a powerful way to explore ourselves and the world around us. One of the gentlemen that I found while doing this is named Warren Berger, and he has a whole book on it and a great presentation. But he talks about questions drive creation, and you can look at Einstein and Steve Jobs of just asking a lot of different questions. And I'll share at the very end what he calls a beautiful question from Einstein. So if you stick around, you'll listen to that quote or get to hear that quote. And something too, I've done so many interviews over the past 10 years. We do interviews for our clients who hire us and to do video series. I'm usually the one behind the camera asking questions and get cut out. And then I also moderate panels and have been on, I can't even count how many panels. So I know the power of asking questions in that context too. And somewhere along the way, someone gave me this advice that, or I read it, I don't know where I got it from, that if you don't like the answer, if you don't get the answer that you're looking for, it's probably because you didn't ask the right question. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think about that a lot. Like, am I asking the right questions? And one thing I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm still very much in the pondering, marinating stage, and once my thoughts become more fully formed, I'll share them with you. But I'd love to actually hear your thoughts. But one of the questions I'm thinking about right now is just like, post coronavirus, in an ideal world, if we get to reset things, during this great pause, how do we want brands play a part in our lives. Um, Personally, I think, and this is coming from a social media marketer, I think they take up a lot of our consciousness, and consumption habits can't sustain the way that they are. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and I will share those thoughts with you as they're more fully formed. And I looked at a few different futurist websites to kind of, they have like the future of travel, the future of cities, the future of, this and that, but not many of them had the future of brands. And one thing I also think is interesting is, if you look at futuristic movies or sci-fi movies, um, you don't see a lot of brands in them. The brands of the future, they're very clean and minimalistic, and consumerism is kind of not at the forefront. So I'll be exploring that more and invite you to ask that question too, of how do we want brands to play a role in the future. Um, so I'll share the links to these articles. Well, they're actually all in the newsletter, so I'll share the link to the newsletter. But yeah, questions are something I think that we might take for granted because we do them all day, every day, and in communication with others. But I invite you to also be aware of how you can use them to uh, explore more about yourself, but also connect with others. And then, of course, that goes with asking questions, listening, and using empathy, and all those other great tools in the toolbox. But yeah, questions. There's a lot more to them than meets the eye. So that's in the theme for the newsletter, um, for the opening, and we'll probably put it up on the blog. So for news and links, oh, there's just so much that happens. So one interesting thing that we'll probably be talking about a lot since we're in an election year here in the US is media manipulation. And if you didn't miss it in the last, 48 hours or so, um, Twitter, for the first time, called out Donald Trump for misinformation, but in about the most minimal possible way of flagging two of Donald Trump's tweets with a fact check for the first time about mail-in comment that he had tweeted about mail-in voter fraud. And then Trump responds with, he's going to do this executive order, and it's still kind of playing out right now on Twitter and whatnot, saying that this is a violation of the First Amendment, which it's not, and threatening all these things with Twitter. But one of the things that he said, and is something that you hear a lot from the far right, is that social media sites are liberal and they try to suppress voices of the right. Um, and that's something that I wanted to address. And there's this great article by Data and Society, and they do a lot of amazing work on um, just research and fairness on the web, and the media manipulation, among other things. They're a really great resource, and they have a really massive blog post. But one of the things about media manipulation that they point out, and you see this all the time on social media, is part of doing, saying the social media sites are suppressing right voices, is actually a tactic, because it's hard to prove, that so and so at so and so platform is going to vote Democratic, and all of that stuff. So then the platforms, as a response, overcompensate and try to say, "Oh no, we're actually really fair," and then give them more leeway. And they know this will happen. So the tactic of saying you're suppressing, making a big stink about it, then the platforms overcompensate, and then they actually, the far right gets more of what they want in that regard. And you see this with Facebook. although I think they got rid of the, the official newsfeed, not the like official publication newsfeed. But Breitbart ended up on that as a authoritative news source, and it's like, why in the heck would they end up there? But it's because of them trying to prove that they have, they're not so liberal and doing conservative voices, to the fault of putting out an authoritative source that does misinformation and all of this stuff all the time. So it's something to be hyper aware of, and I'll try to incorporate more tips about media manipulation and the spread of misinformation on this, just so everyone can just be a little bit more informed. And in general, everyone, we all just need to be very vigilant right now. Um, and I still, if you haven't downloaded or used NewsGuard, it's a great plugin for browsers that check links for their authority and grades them on a lot of different things, which I also recommend. So, yes, so be careful when you see sites saying, um, you know, that platforms are suppressing voices. Now, there is a lot that needs to happen with these social media platforms, but being used for media manipulation doesn't benefit anyone. And then our dear friend Twitter, they just have a lot of issues. Um, and I should say, I want Twitter to succeed. I want all of the platforms to succeed, but there's a lot that needs to be done for the betterment of society in general for them. So a study came out from, what was it? I think a research group at Carnegie Mellon, that nearly half of the Twitter accounts pushing to reopen America and tweeting about the coronavirus are likely bots. Like, that's an enormous bot issue. And they went through like 200 million tweets or so to uncover this. And just the propaganda machine, and there's a lot of nuance to it too, in terms of you can't just shut them down, uh, or block them because they come back in droves, but they are also extremely coordinated and networks, and it's getting harder to tell, if a person's real or not, depending on how they build up their profiles. Um, but I mean, that's, to me, pretty astounding. And I've been on Twitter. Every once in a while I'll uh, spar with someone on Twitter about a political topic. I try not to, but there was one point where I was like, I don't know if I'm talking to a human or a bot or a cyborg or a combo of the two. A cybot, I think that's what they're called. But that many bots out there amplifying misinformation from bad actors who have ill will against the US, and their goal is to division and to capitalize on the division. It's just horrific. So it's a huge, huge problem. Facebook, is just larger and has more resources to um, at their disposal than Twitter, but I mean, both platforms have to fix the misinformation and the bot issues. And one thing that Trump said is like, there's going to be regulation, which I'm actually for more regulation for both of these, well, all social media platforms in general. But that's something else to be aware of. Anytime you see information, like, I always ask, who benefits from the result of seeing this content? If it's divisive or polarizing, who's going to be making money off of this content? And usually it's not for the good of who's reading it. Okay, so Facebook is also rolling out, more in the social media marketing world, a new revised Facebook layout, and I sampled it already. And for social media marketers, everyone's gonna get just used to the new layout. It also means that the cover images on Facebook pages are going to have to be updated to the new specs. I don't have those yet. And one of our Facebook ad partners, AdMix, and the founder and CEO, Zach, we go way back. He's a Facebook OG, and we met. It's actually a funny story at a pseudo Facebook garage at South by Southwest. My goodness, 9, 10 years ago. But anyway, his company specializes in Facebook ads for e-commerce stores. And they did a great blog post kind of comparing the old ads or the current ad specs to the Facebook new ads. For the most part, advertisers and the feed are going to get more space. So that's good from an advertising perspective. And one thing that he pointed out, which is kind of like an old Facebook, what would be the word? Oh, I haven't had enough coffee this morning. But anyway, just something typical of Facebook is anytime that they roll out any new features, they do tons and tons of testing on it. So they want to make sure to engage people and make sure that the new products, keep people on Facebook longer. So any of these new rollouts is going to be beneficial to marketers in that regard. Our time spent on social media platforms in an individual sense is another question to be discussed another day. But from the marketing perspective, these changes just are good because it gives brands and businesses more opportunity to engage with their community, which is good. Okay, so we've got a little bit more time. So for the inspiration section, I wanted to talk about the May 24th. Oh, actually, let me look. There were a few other links in the newsletter that I wanted to point out. Let's see. Oh, this was something interesting. Twitter is testing a new feature that limits who can reply to your tweets. And I retweeted this morning. They released a little video that shows how it works. And it's interesting because you tag people in the tweet, and then it's a public conversation between the people tagged, and people can like and I think retweet, but can't comment on those tweets. So to me, it kind of is like an evolution of Twitter chats, but more almost in like a panel form where you can have public figures or celebrities have a live conversation on Twitter that people can watch and follow, but just not directly engage with. So I think it's an interesting play, and I'll be really interested to see the different use cases that emerge from it. And I think they're still in the beta testing phase and seeing what's going to happen with it. But that's an interesting feature from Twitter, especially with the election year. I could see town halls or happening with that feature too. Oh, and then another thing. You might have already seen one of these if you're on Instagram. There's Versus. CNN did a story on this where who is it? Swiss Beats and Timberland put two artists head to head for battle, and I haven't watched one myself, but I've seen my feeds blow up with people getting really excited about these battles. So that's been an interesting, you know, uh, phenomenon that's happened on Instagram Live. So it's a good article, and if you haven't seen one of the verses, it's definitely one of the more fun things to pop up. Okay, so for the inspiration section from the New York Times, I am a fan of the New York Times for many reasons. From a social media and digital standpoint, um, they and actually the Washington Post have their own teams that are just kind of there to do exploratory, test new platforms. That's why as soon as Snapchat kind of popped up on the scene, they had channels and were testing it out. The New York Times, I forget, they gave out 1 million or so cardboard VR goggles. So they're very on top of like the latest technology and testing it and doing interactive articles. The the last Olympics, they did some really amazing interactive websites. I remember one of the gymnast Simone, where I mean, you scroll through and there was graphics and things popping up. So from a digital media standpoint, they do some really interesting things and are always testing the envelope. And often I look to their Instagram account, how they're doing stories, because they're really using stories in a photojournalistic reportage way, which is really interesting. And for the this milestone, this heartbreaking milestone that we just surpassed, of 100,000 lives lost in the U.S. to the coronavirus, they wanted to um, memorialize this milestone. That might not be the right word, but they dedicated the entire front page to all the names. I'm sure everyone has seen it, and pulled from all these local newspapers to see the obituaries. So in some way, it was very dramatic. It's the first, the behind the scenes article on it said that this was the first time in 40 years that there wasn't an image on the cover of the New York Times. Um, so that was very, just like, I've got chill bumps just talking about striking, front page. And then they also did an interactive version of the front page. And that's from the social media marketing standpoint. We always talk about, you know, you can bring a story alive in multiple ways. And I think this is a really great example of that from that standpoint. They have a print which is, you know, very powerful, and then they recreated it as an interactive website, which is powerful in its own right. And then also did a behind the scenes blog post kind of exploring the decision making behind how they arrived to move forward with this. Um, so great storytelling. And the story that they were telling is a very somber and sobering one. And the way that they did it was really because they wanted to make sure that there's people. And there's a great quote. They, on the interactive version, Dave Barry did an essay that's woven throughout. And here's one of them, or one of the two lines from it. 100,000. A number is an imperfect measure when applied to the human condition. A number provides an answer to how many, but it can never convey the individual arcs of life, the 100,000 ways of greeting the morning and saying good night. And just reading it, and they pull out little lines of people's obituaries. I mean, I really got teary-eyed reading it. So during this time, I think we haven't personally, I grieved collectively. We're still in the midst of it happening, but I think this is one of the more beautiful ways that I've seen really acknowledge what's happening right now. But I promised to end on a good note. Oh, and also, you know, since this is on questions, one of the things that we ended the newsletter with is, you know, we shouldn't stop asking questions, and we shouldn't stop asking questions to honor their lives. So the ones that we post in the newsletter are why, what have we learned, how can we ensure this doesn't happen again, and what can we do today? So as we ask a lot of questions, I hope that we all, you know, reflect on those. But I did promise to end on a good note, and this Einstein quote. And we're almost right at the hour for those watching live. So the gentleman I mentioned at the beginning, what's his name? Let me scroll up. Oh, it's over here. Berger, what's his first name? Warren Berger. He has another book called Beautiful Questions, and one of the great questioners of our time, in recent history, is Einstein. And I'll just read it. From my understanding, Einstein's theory of relativity, changed our understanding of the universe. No big deal. Began with what he calls a beautiful question. So Einstein just posed a question, and it was something along the lines of, what if I rode a beam of light across the universe? So I thought that was just so beautiful. It seems like a childlike question. What if I could ride a beam of light across the universe? And we got the theory of relativity from that. So I invite you to ask questions today, every day, and see what just asking questions opens up without really thinking so much about what the answer should be. So thank you for joining today. We're right at 30 minutes. And if you're joining not live, appreciate you watching any time of day. And again, be sure to like our page on Facebook and you'll get notified when we go live. I will be doing this every morning at Thursday mornings at 7:30 a.m. East Coast time. Do sign up for our monthly newsletter. Links to what I mentioned today will be in the description on our Facebook page of the video. And then, yeah, have a good day. And I look forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions or topics, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, see you next Thursday.